Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1. Where is your rider? Written by Whiskey Lullaby. Elytria stood at her desk, rubbing the soot of her face as the castle shook again under the weight of the orcish bombards. Her elven ears hang low as she grit her teeth, staring at the mystical battle map spread before her, looking for some weakness to exploit. Some thin line to break through and regroup with the kingdom's forces. She was dragged from her reverie by the door opening. She recognized the brightly colored uniform of the Jungerberg 3rd Regiment of Dragons, a human unit that had been assigned to her during the Alliance push to reclaim the Duchy of Mortham from the Orc invaders. This was their leader, Captain Matthews, the only ranking officer left after the disastrous battle that had left them trapped here. He set his dented, plumed helm on the table. "Your Highness, I think I have a plan. You won't like it, but it's preferable to total annihilation and the death or capture of an elven royal." Elytria froze before saying, "Was it that obvious?" Matthews gave a grim chuckle. "You're rather poor at lying, all due respect." Elytria stood, brushing some of the grime from her ranks of stripes. "Well then, Captain, what is this plan you are so certain that I won't like?" Matthews nodded, saluting. "My regiment and I, as well as the remains of the High Rock Musketeers, will make a final charge here, and in an attempt to punch through the infantry lines and cut down the crews of the bombards and ignite the enemy's powder stores. While they are distracted and disorganized, you'll lead the remainder of the Alliance forces through the gap before it can close. We'll hold it open as long as we can." Elytria was stunned as she stared down at the captain. Softly, she spoke. "That, might work, but it is suicide." Matthew shrugged. "So is doing nothing. My men and I are cavalry. Our carbines are depleted of munitions, and all we have left are pistols and sabers. We are not made to defend walls or breaches. I've already discussed this with my men. If we must die, let us do so with glory." Niall struggled with herself for a moment, staring once again at the map in hopes of finding some other solution. But there was none. "Permission granted. I want the list of all your names. Each and every one of you is going on my personal shrine. Hang the traditions. If any of you survive this, you'll be nobles," she said, tears streaking the dirt on her face as the human nodded and replaced his helmet. "I'll look forward to it," he said with a salute before dashing off. Less than an hour later, the battered gates opened. Elytria stood at the top of the gatehouse to bear witness to this moment. 100 dark horses, their riders shouting a war cry of their city-state, followed by an additional 150 elite infantry. The High Rock Musketeers dressed not in their battle uniforms, but the bright green of the parade dress. As she watched, the cavalry ate the distance between the besieged orcs and the castle, banner flowing in the wind even as the enemy camp disappeared in gunsmoke. Riders fell, horses stumbled and flipped, but the charge continued. Their pistols barked once before being cast away, and even at that distance, Elytria saw that it was a telling blow, as orc officers and marksmen fell and the defenders became disorganized. The riders drew their glowing blades as they closed. Another volley from the orcs and more brave riders fell. But then they were upon them, crashing like a wave through the wall of sand, scattering the barbarous orcs with white of steel. The camp swarmed as they tried to stop the momentum, forgetting about the musketeers following behind the cavalry. Just as the riders' momentum fell and their numbers became dishearteningly small, the muskets got within range. One full volley into the swirling melee, and then a charge, bayonets gleaming. Together, the remnants pushed through the line as Elytria rallied the rest of the forces to prepare for the escape. She watched the doomed soldiers fight a corridor into the making, as one familiar dragoon rode hard towards the bombards, lit torch in hand. As he reached the great guns, he tossed the torch into the haphazard magazine. A great roar silenced all else as the guns and everything near them ceased to exist. Elytria made a good use of the sudden silence, rallying the troops within the castle and leading them through the gap in the enemy lines, stopping only once to collect a dented, plumed helmet. She never forgot that day for the rest of her life. End of story. Story number 2. The Undying Specialist, written by Operation Technician. Caster troops rushed into the chamber, their armor cracking the marble floor. The Queen stood up and looked into the sensors of their armor as the entire squadron piled into the throne room. They had broken through the station defenses, even as the last of their allies were wiped out. As the last of the caster troops piled in, forming a firing line at the other side of the chamber, the Queen saw the human mercenary walk into the chamber behind him. He stood slightly behind the line and smiled at the Queen. "Traitor!" roared the Queen in rage. "That's how they've gotten through. Now to think that she paid for the most elite of the human forces." The caster troop commander entered the room last. One of the 4 arms patted the human on the shoulder and took position with the rest of the line, aiming its weapons at the Queen. "Betrayed no contract," sang a musical voice, reverberating throughout the room. The caster turned around, staring at the human as she spread her arms. "Failed no job." 6 distinct pings sounded as a small metal object fell out of the human's hands onto the cracked marble. "Lose no war," proclaimed the human, as the 6 antimatter grenades at her belt pinged red and detonated. The caster troops were shredded, and on the opposite side of the massive throne room, the Queen was thrown back into a chair. The army marched on caster capital. The unrelenting hail of orbital strikes collapsed the shields, and the Queen's troops rushed into the city. The Queen herself, riding on the flag tank, commanded the forces as they plowed through the barricades, rushing to the main fortress. More caster troops flowed out of the city, and the Queen's advance was slowed and eventually put into a stalemate. Casualties mounted. "Surrender, Queen!" was heard over the city speaker system. The caster Emperor himself was speaking to the invading army. Through the sensors in the tank, the Queen looked at the top of the tower, where, behind armored glass, stood the Emperor, staring down at the burning city. Behind him materialized a shadow, and over the Emperor's voice came an impossibly familiar musical tones of human speech. "And if you fall, come back and try again." And now materialized human raised her weapon, and the caster Emperor's guts splashed onto the armored glass for all the ground to see. She smiled down, looking at the Queen's tank. Even as the caster began to surrender, gunfire rang from behind the human. Several shots struck the window from the inside, and her body collapsed, disappearing from view. "How is this possible?" questioned the Queen, glaring down at a 3-meter height onto the human commander. "What is?" The human looked annoyed and distracted, as if he had anything better to do than talk to the Queen. "One human killed my attackers before, sacrificing her. The same human killed the Emperor." The commander looked up at the Queen, thought for a moment, and motioned her to follow. Stopping by the massive mechanized crate, the commander entered something, and a black cube was dispensed out the crate into his hand. Pocketing it, the commander led the Queen to the other side of the camp. The two walked to the tent. A massive machine stood at the center of the tent, and a bored-looking human sat on a chair near it, reading his tablet. Another human was getting dressed in the corner, grumbling. The commander threw the cube to the man sitting by the machine. Sighing, the man pressed something, halting the machine. "Recycling," said the machine, roaring to for a moment, and went quiet, dispensing another crystal back into the bank of such crystals at the side. "Ready." The man inserted the crystal, and the machine came to life once more. The Queen looked on in confusion as the progress circle filled up the machine screen. A hatch opened, and a convert rolled out of the fresh human. The same human that saved the Queen and killed the Emperor. The Queen looked in awe, the commander with impatience, as the undying human rolled off the conveyor and sat up. Cracking her neck, she got up and ran to the locker at the corner of the tent, quickly dressing and facing the exit. Her musical voice sounded, nearly shattering the Queen's already damaged consciousness. "Oh, hello, Commander, sir, and, Queen. Nice to see you again." End of story. I would quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and Patreons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, Lord Azrakal, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Dragzoon WRE, Holly's Sister, Arcadian. Thank you very much.